shadow of guilt. In a quiet hospital, the night felt more ominous than usual. Alia, a young nurse, was still on her night shift. It had only been a few months since she started working here, but tonight the burden felt unbearable. A few weeks ago, a small mistake changed everything. Alia had accidentally administered the wrong medication to a patient, Mrs. Ningsi, a woman who should have recovered. Because of that mistake, Mrs. Ningsi passed away, and since then, Alia's life was never the same again. Every night, guilt haunted her, but that wasn't the only thing. Alia felt like she was being watched. Something or someone was constantly following her every move. Alia walks quickly down the hospital's empty corridor. The cold air presses against her, and her footsteps echo through the hallway. But it wasn't just her footsteps she heard. There was another sound, quieter, more sinister. Since that night, Alia began seeing things she couldn't explain. The figure of Mrs. Ningsi appeared in shadows, haunting her. Whenever Alia turned around, the figure would disappear, but the shadow grew more vivid each time. Alia quickened her pace, but the sound of the footsteps didn't stop. When she turned, no one was there. However, at the far end of the hallway, the faint outline of a woman stood still, watching her. Her face was pale, empty, and filled with accusation. Alia wakes from a nightmare. Her breath comes in ragged gasps, her body trembling. In the dark room, a whisper calls out softly from the corners of the room. Whisper, "Alia, why did you let me die?" Alia's eyes search the room, but all she can see is darkness. Yet a shadow appears in the mirror in front of her bed. There, Mrs. Ningsi stands, with a cold smile, her face transforming into something terrifying. The overwhelming guilt began to consume Alia. She knew this wasn't just a hallucination. That shadow, that whisper, it was the result of a mistake she could never undo. Alia tries to flee from her room, but the voice grows louder. The mirror begins to fog up, forming words. Words in the mirror. "You must pay." The sound of glass shattering echoes through the room, and the figure of Mrs. Ningsi gets closer. Her face becomes more horrifying, her empty eyes staring directly at Alia. She screams, but no one can hear. Alia returns to the hospital to seek answers. In the room where Mrs. Ningsi once stayed, the air felt cold, almost frozen. The heart monitor, which should be turned off, now beeps faintly, like a weak heartbeat. Alia knew she had to face her fears. The shadow of Mrs. Ningsi would not go away easily. Something was keeping her here, something only Alia could release. The figure of Mrs. Ningsi appears once more, this time more real than ever. With a cold smile, she moves toward Alia, as if demanding payment. But Alia finally realized this ghost wasn't about revenge. It wasn't Mrs. Ningsi haunting her. It was the guilt Alia held deep inside. As Mrs. Ningsi approached, Alia faced her with calm. In her heart, she said, "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. If I could change it all, I would." And at that moment, Mrs. Ningsi's shadow stopped. The anger in her face softened. Slowly, the figure disappeared, as though finding peace. The next morning, Alia wakes up feeling different. Not scared anymore, but at peace for the first time in weeks. She realized that all along, it was herself she couldn't forgive. But by having the courage to face her guilt, she finally found peace. The next day, Alia returned to work, but this time, she no longer felt haunted. She had found peace with herself. The mistake she made couldn't be undone, but she could choose to learn from it and live with a wiser heart. Every mistake is a lesson. Forgive yourself, fix what can be fixed, and move forward with a stronger heart. Because in every guilt, there's a chance to grow and become better. Inspirational message. No one is perfect. We all fall, but how we rise defines who we are. Forgive yourself and keep moving forward to a better life.